Bridget Riley has a very interesting approach to art. Rather than have a particular subject matter or a particular theme or content that she's engaging with when she makes a picture, she considers perception itself the medium that she's working through. So she's a painter and she makes paintings, but actually through creation of composition, working through abstraction, she creates a perceptual encounter with the viewer. Bridget Riley had a very classical training in art. She learned the art of representation. She learned life drawing. She learned how to draw and paint landscape. And she learned all of the things about tone and light and shade, rendering, the way light reflects off surfaces, composition and depth. All of those basics of art practice, of representation. Over the course of her studies and her early work, Riley had a very close connection, or saw her work as having a very close connection with this long tradition of painting. Amongst the artists that Riley looked back to included Impressionists and Post-Impressionists. There are artists like Monet, Bonnard, Matisse, and in particular, Georges Seurat, the French painter, was of importance for her. And through a number of artworks, she learned essentially the lessons that Georges Seurat had taught himself. Seurat was a pointillist painter or a divisionist painter. And that style is the application of thousands of dots of pure color. But when you stand back and look at it, they emerge together and you can resolve a picture. And Riley studied this and from their point of view, and she made a number of works which were in the style of a pointillist painter to teach herself and to equip herself with the understanding of exactly how it is that perception works. So through her early years, Riley had been working in a representational manner. She'd been rendering the figure or landscape. At a point in the early 60s, she broke with representation and decided to pursue abstraction. And she wanted to pare things down as much as possible. And that included purging color and going to strictly black and white. But it also included arranging or coming up with a composition that had a very minimal approach to it. And it's important to note that this minimal approach, I think, differed from other painters who went down a similar path to abstraction, and whereas they may have done an all-black canvas or an all-white canvas, and in that way been sort of ultimately minimal, Riley always sought to have a greater dynamism in the work, but with minimal components. So her first picture, Kiss, in the early 1960s, actually has quite a bit of movement through it, even though it only has the two colors and a very pared back composition. Riley continued to explore black and white, and actually introduced gray as well as a color. So you then had sequences, not only across tones and shades, also across composition. And in a way, she wanted to give herself enough time to sort of push that to the limits. So those black and white works from the 60s are in a way the most optically striking. They're very potent experiences. As she moved on into the late 1960s, she reintroduced color to her work. And when she does this, she does it in small steps. She explores a very limited palette, choosing maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 colors very carefully, but only examining the relationship between those few colors. But that plays out on an epic scale. And that becomes something of a horizon or a field of view for the visitor. And what's remarkable about these works is when you spend some time in front of the pictures, the colors play off of each other and actually generate further colors. And this can differ from viewer to viewer because we all see a little differently. But when you give these works time to sort of unfold on your eyeballs, in your brain, different sensations and different colors can emerge from just the composition and the choices that Riley has set out within the painting.
You can see it's two pairs of colours, a light pink and a magenta pink, and a blue and a green, so that each pair is related, and then both are pitched against each other. I was going to call it a bacchanal without nymphs. And then I thought, no, I mustn't do that. That's I'm an abstract painter. I can't possibly have anything like that creeping in. So I called it Evoe because in ancient Greece, the men and women taking part in a bacchanal would shout out Evoe, both of them equally.
Riley's titles are quite interesting. Riley's titles might give you a hint of something. They might give you a particular clue or a small reference that can sometimes be musical, can sometimes be atmospheric. In the work behind me, Rajasthan, might give you a sense of a location. However, the titles never fully describe a sort of contextual situation or contextual lens through which to read the work. And that's because the work does need, in a way, to stand on its own with the perceptual effects or engagement that you have with it. So Riley is very careful to maybe create a mood with her titles, but not to overly describe something which may close down how you experience the work. When making a work, Riley spends a lot of time working out the colors and the composition, because those are the key aspects of a picture. And that work is done in studio, and it's a lot of intuitive understanding about how colors relate to each other and how composition might be read or might affect a viewer. It's also done with a lot of experimentation. So there's a lot of studies that reveal something of that working process. So you might find a cartoon of a picture that's heavily annotated in pencil markings about this color one way, and then you might have a different cartoon that says, actually, we try it a different way and we'll go in that direction. Once a cartoon is settled upon and it's finally ready to become a final image, Riley works with a team in her studio and they create the final canvas, the final picture. Well, I think that one of the great things about Riley's work, and it's the thing she's sort of developed over years and years and years to make her own, is that the viewer really is half of the equation. So on the one hand, you have all these decisions about color and composition and size and scale. And on the other, you have all the different people who will encounter these pictures. And they see differently, they stand at different heights, they bring to each picture different histories or histories of perception. Although they are pictures and they're paintings that are most often hung on the wall, they're also something of an event. So there's something durational about the experience of viewing them. And I often ask people to stand in front of a picture much longer than they usually would. And in this modern age of an increasingly short attention span, it's important that one gives the paintings time to unfold and to fully allow you to engage with their different perceptual effects. And whilst one person might say, this work to me feels like very quick and zippy, somebody else might say, well, actually, this one to me looks like it's kind of asking you to slow down a bit and spend a bit more time. When Riley made her black and white works, she was included in an exhibition in New York at the Museum of Modern Art. This is in 1965, and it was called The Responsive Eye. And the curators of that exhibition thought her work was fantastic, and so fantastic that they put her painting on the cover of the catalog. And that was a really great and early moment of recognition for Riley at such a prestigious organization. Then she followed on with a tour through Europe that also came to the Hayward Gallery in 1971. Coinciding with this activity was a cultural phenomenon of op art. And there was, I think, a moment where culturally and socially there seems to be the conversation going on between art and perception and things like fashion and music, maybe architecture, but certainly a much more pop life sensibility. For Riley, that was a sort of factual thing that happened in the past, the sort of coincidence of those two things. But she's always been really clear that her trajectory has come out of the longer and sort of rich tradition of art and painting specifically. And so that now, decades later, pop art is a sort of chapter in the history books, a cultural phenomenon. But Riley's work, on the other hand, has stood the test of time.